Why have humans been fighting wars for as long as we can remember? It's about control, survival, revenge, and resources. From the early battles for food and shelter to today's global wars, the reasons for fighting have always been driven by basic human instincts. However, the weapons and strategies have changed a lot over time. Wars didn't start with guns and tanks. They began when our ancestors fought over things like water and hunting grounds. As we look back through history, we'll see how small fights between early humans grew into huge tech-driven wars. From the mass graves at Jebel Sahaba to the nuclear tensions of the Cold War, the history of war is not just about destruction, but also about how human creativity shaped it. While we've made huge advancements in military technology, we've also learned tough lessons about the true cost of war, lessons that still affect us today. So why study the history of war? Because by understanding how we got here, we might avoid making the same mistakes in the future. The origins of human conflict stretch far back into prehistory, long before written records. During this time, our ancestors, early hominins and later hunter-gatherer societies, faced harsh environments, competition for resources, and survival challenges that occasionally led to violence. This period gives an interesting look at the first examples of organized human conflict. Conflict among prehistoric humans was not war in the modern sense, but rather small-scale violence that arose out of necessity or competition. The causes and nature of these conflicts are pieced together through archaeological evidence. Archaeological discoveries reveal that violence existed as far back as the Late Stone Age. For example, at Jebel Sahaba, an ancient cemetery, the remains of more than 60 people were found. Many of the skeletons showed clear signs of violent injuries, like arrowheads stuck in bones and marks from blunt force trauma. These findings suggest that conflict and violence were a part of life for the people who lived there. These findings suggest that groups engaged in violent encounters, likely due to competition over dwindling resources as the last ice age ended. These injuries and deaths may represent one of the earliest known examples of organized group conflict. Stone tools, like hand axes and spears, were used for hunting but could also double as weapons in disputes. Bone injuries that match the kind caused by club strikes or being hit by projectiles suggest that there were violent clashes between individuals or groups. Water sources like rivers, lakes, and springs were critical for survival, especially in arid regions. Competition over these limited resources likely sparked disputes. Large game animals were vital for sustenance. Groups would have clashed over access to prime hunting areas. Caves or protected areas were essential for survival against predators and harsh climates. Groups may have fought to secure these locations. Early human migration patterns often centered around resource-rich areas, increasing the likelihood of territorial disputes. As climates fluctuated during the ice ages, shrinking habitable areas forced groups into closer contact, raising tensions. Droughts or floods may have intensified competition, making violence a more frequent outcome. In hunter-gatherer societies, violence was usually short and involved small skirmishes rather than long battles. The weapons they used were basic, like sharpened sticks, stone-tipped spears, and later, bows and arrows. Conflicts often started over territory, as groups needed to protect their hunting and foraging areas from others. Fights could also break out over mates, especially in societies where men held more power. Additionally, violence could be fueled by retribution, with groups seeking revenge if a member was harmed by another. Small group sizes, usually 20 to 50 individuals, limited the scale of violence. A single violent death could significantly impact group survival, so full-scale wars were impractical. Disputes were often resolved through social pressures, negotiation, or exile rather than continual fighting. Anthropologists have studied modern hunter-gatherers like the Kung San of southern Africa or the Yanomami of South America to infer patterns of prehistoric conflict. Men were typically the primary participants in conflicts, often due to their roles as hunters and protectors. Women's roles included supporting survival needs and influencing decisions within the group, though they were sometimes the catalysts of disputes over mating. Unlike modern warfare, prehistoric violence had clear constraints. Sparse populations meant less frequent contact between groups, limiting large-scale conflict. Without advanced tools or coordinated strategies, conflicts were more about intimidation and survival than outright destruction. Energy and resources were better spent on hunting, gathering, and protecting one's group rather than prolonged fighting. Prehistoric disputes over resources and territory set the stage for the larger, more organized conflicts seen in later periods. The agricultural revolution was a major turning point in human history. People moved from a nomadic lifestyle where they hunted and gathered food to settled farming communities. This change led to big shifts in society, including the way conflicts started and were fought. In this time, agriculture played a key role in shaping how wars were fought, and this period became an important moment in the development of human conflict. Before agriculture, human groups were small, mobile, and focused on subsistence. However, the domestication of plants and animals around 10,000 BCE changed everything. With farming, people could grow more food than they immediately needed. This surplus allowed populations to grow and gave rise to permanent settlements. However, surplus food also became a resource worth fighting over. Control of stored grain meant control of wealth and power. Those who managed and controlled the surplus, such as community leaders or early elites, gained more influence, creating divisions in society. Unlike nomadic hunter-gatherers who moved freely, agricultural societies were tied to specific plots of land. This land became a valuable and limited resource. Disputes over fertile land or water sources often led to violent conflicts. Farming societies required cooperation to maintain irrigation systems and shared resources, but disagreements over these systems sometimes led to war. Permanent settlements, especially those storing food, became targets for raids. Defending these resources led to the development of organized groups of warriors. Settled life made people more vulnerable to attacks than mobile groups. This vulnerability increased the need for protective measures. One of the most significant developments during the agricultural revolution was the construction of fortifications, as communities sought to protect their resources and people from both internal and external threats. Jericho, located in the Jordan Valley, is one of the earliest known fortified settlements, dating back to around 9000 BCE. Archaeologists have discovered large stone walls and a circular tower, which were probably built to protect the settlement from attacks. These structures show that people worked together to defend their community, suggesting that conflicts and threats were becoming more common even in such early times. As farming spread to different areas, communities started building walls around their settlements. These walls were not just for protection, but also showed how wealthy a community was and how well they could organize people to build them. Early societies in places like Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and the Nile River Valley used similar methods to protect and strengthen their communities. The agricultural revolution gave rise to some of the first city-states in Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq. These places became hotbeds of conflict as societies grew more complex. By around 4000 BCE, cities like Uruk and Ur had emerged in southern Mesopotamia. These city-states were centers of culture, trade, and agriculture. They were also highly competitive, often fighting over land, water rights, and trade routes. Uruk, one of the first cities in the world, is closely linked to the beginning of organized warfare. Evidence from ancient tablets and discoveries show that Uruk had conflicts with nearby settlements over fertile land and access to water. The city of Ur, located near the Euphrates River, offers valuable lessons about early city-state defense. The city had walls and other defensive structures, highlighting how important it was to protect itself from outside threats. The city-states in this region often formed alliances or went to war with each other based on political interests and the need for resources, showing how complex diplomacy and conflict were even in ancient times. The shift to agriculture created entirely new conditions for human conflict, many of which remain relevant today. As land and resources became essential for survival, societies began to see war as a means of acquiring or defending these assets. The inability to flee easily led to the necessity of defending territories, a concept that would shape human warfare for millennia. cooperation in building fortifications and managing resources translated into more organized military efforts. The Bronze Age marked a turning point in human history, introducing organized warfare on a scale previously unimaginable. With the advent of bronze, a harder and more durable material than stone or copper, civilizations transformed their tools of war and began developing strategies, tactics, and structures that defined early empires. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, was revolutionary for its strength and malleability. It became the primary material for crafting weapons, armor, and tools, giving societies that mastered it a significant military advantage. The first true swords appeared during the Bronze Age. Unlike earlier stone tools, bronze swords could be sharpened to a fine edge, making them ideal for close combat. Tools like the Naue Type II sword, used across Europe and the Near East, became a standard weapon in this period. Bronze axes served dual purposes, as tools and as weapons. Battle axes with sharpened edges were devastating in combat, capable of piercing primitive shields and armor. Bronze spear tips and arrowheads improved range and penetration, making ranged combat more effective. Shields made from wood and covered in bronze offered protection against swords and arrows. Bronze helmets and breastplates provided the first forms of personal armor, offering limited but significant protection. The durability and reliability of bronze weapons allowed for prolonged battles and more organized combat. Societies with access to bronze production gained military superiority, leading to the rise of regional powers. Warriors were no longer just farmers or hunters. Professional soldiers became a key part of society. Infantry, cavalry, and charioteers formed distinct units. The chariot, pulled by horses, revolutionized mobility in battle. It was used for rapid assaults, archery platforms, and command centers. The Hittites were pioneers in chariot warfare, using light and fast chariots with spoked wheels to dominate their enemies. The development of tactics, such as flanking maneuvers and ambushes, became prevalent. Commanders began organizing soldiers into ranks, improving coordination on the battlefield. The Bronze Age saw the growth of powerful empires, particularly in Mesopotamia and Egypt. These civilizations waged wars to expand territories, secure resources, and maintain dominance. The Sumerians built the earliest city-states, such as Ur and Uruk, which often fought for control of fertile land and water. Warfare included phalanx-style formations with bronze-tipped spears and shields. Under Sargon of Akkad, the Akkadian Empire became the world's first empire. Sargon used standing armies and standardized equipment to maintain control over vast territories. Egypt, often called the land of the pharaohs, was known for its military strength and expansion. The ancient Egyptian army carried out campaigns into Nubia and the Levant, showcasing their ambition to control and influence surrounding regions. One of the most remarkable examples of their military achievements is the Battle of Megiddo, fought around 1457 BCE. This battle is considered the first recorded conflict in history. Pharaoh Thutmose III led his forces against a coalition of Canaanite rulers. Egyptian scribes documented the event in great detail, providing insights into the tactics, logistics, and the dramatic siege of the fortified city of Megiddo. The Egyptians achieved a decisive victory, reinforcing their dominance and marking a turning point in the region's history. The invention of writing during the Bronze Age added a new dimension to warfare. For the first time, wars could be documented, strategies shared, and propaganda spread. Military records from ancient Mesopotamia offer valuable insights into early warfare. Some of the earliest cuneiform tablets provide detailed accounts of battles, peace treaties, and the organization of war efforts. A notable example is the Stele of the Vultures from around 2500 BCE. This artifact celebrates a Sumerian victory by the city-state of Lagash over its rival, Umma. It even shows soldiers marching in a phalanx formation, highlighting the strategic methods used in combat during that time. Writing enabled the creation of treaties, such as the Treaty of Kadesh between the Egyptians and Hittites, one of the earliest known peace agreements. Rulers used inscriptions and monuments to glorify their victories and divine support. Egyptian pharaohs often attributed their successes to the gods, portraying themselves as chosen leaders in battle. Bronze was expensive and dependent on the availability of tin and copper, which were scarce and difficult to source. Iron, on the other hand, was more abundant and cheaper, making it accessible to a wider range of societies. Advancements in metallurgy enabled stronger and more durable weapons. Iron swords and spears were less likely to break in battle compared to bronze weapons. Empires like the Assyrians equipped large armies with standardized iron weapons. The Assyrians were among the first to harness iron for mass production, creating formidable armies equipped with iron swords, shields, and chariots. The Iron Age was not just about better weapons, it was about how societies used these tools to build and sustain vast empires. Three empires stand out for their military innovation and strategic organization. The Assyrians were known for their cruelty and efficient military machine. The Assyrians introduced battering rams, siege towers, and tunneling techniques. They used iron-tipped arrows and weapons to conquer fortified cities. They also created a network of roads for rapid troop movements and established standing armies, which were a rarity at the time. The Persian military under rulers like Cyrus the Great and Darius I was characterized by its inclusiveness and strategy. They incorporated soldiers from conquered regions, creating a diverse and adaptable force. They built the Royal Road, enabling efficient communication and troop movement. The Immortals, a 10,000-strong elite unit, were famed for their discipline and loyalty. The Roman Empire, which lasted from 27 BCE to 476 CE, was known for its powerful and well-organized military. Roman soldiers underwent strict training and followed a disciplined structure, which made their armies incredibly effective. They were divided into legions, each consisting of 4,000 to 6,000 men who were experts in formation tactics. The Romans were also skilled engineers, building roads, aqueducts, and forts that served both their military and everyday needs. A famous example of their engineering is Hadrian's Wall in Britain, built in 122 CE to protect against invasions. Their weapons and armor, like the gladius, a short sword, and the scutum, a large shield, became symbols of their military strength and dominance. This era witnessed some of history's most legendary conflicts. These battles were not just struggles for power, but also clashes of cultures and ideologies. The Greco-Persian Wars, fought between 490 and 479 BCE, were a series of battles between the Persian Empire and the Greek city-states. One key event was the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE, where the Athenians, despite being outnumbered, used clever strategies to defeat the Persian army. This victory also inspired the term marathon, honoring the legendary messenger who ran about 26 miles to deliver news of the triumph. Another significant clash was the Battle of Salamis in 480 BCE, a major naval engagement. The Greeks, using their knowledge of the narrow straits, trapped and destroyed the much larger Persian fleet, marking a turning point in naval warfare. The Battle of Thermopylae, fought in 480 BCE, is one of the most famous battles in ancient history. It tells the story of incredible bravery and sacrifice. A small force of 300 Spartans, led by King Leonidas, defended a narrow mountain pass against a much larger Persian army for 3 days. Although the Spartans were eventually defeated, their courage inspired other Greek city-states to come together and resist the Persian invasion. This battle also highlighted the importance of choosing the right terrain in military strategy, as the narrow pass gave the smaller Spartan force an advantage against the massive Persian army. Naval power became an essential component of warfare during this period, particularly for empires and city-states surrounded by water. Triremes were swift and maneuverable ships powered by 3 rows of oarsmen. They were a key part of the naval forces for both the Greeks and the Phoenicians, serving in battles and blockades alike. A famous example is the Athenian fleet at the Battle of Salamis, where these ships played a crucial role in outmaneuvering the larger Persian fleet. Naval tactics of the time included ramming, where ships with bronze-tipped prows were used to smash into and sink enemy vessels, and boarding, where soldiers would climb onto enemy ships for close combat. Control of the seas wasn't just about warfare. It was vital for trade and economic power. For example, the Punic Wars between Carthage and Rome, which took place from 264 to 146 BCE, were largely fought over dominance of Mediterranean sea routes, which were essential for wealth and influence. The Iron Age and Classical era were not just about battles, they also introduced significant military and cultural innovations. The Greeks developed the phalanx formation, where soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder with overlapping shields, creating a nearly impenetrable wall. The Romans perfected siege tactics and combined arms, including infantry, cavalry, and artillery. Rulers used art, monuments, and stories to inspire loyalty and intimidate enemies. Thinkers like Sun Tzu, the author of The Art of War, and Greek philosophers like Socrates and Aristotle debated the ethics and strategies of war. Many strategies and technologies from this era influenced medieval and even modern warfare. Stories of heroism, such as the 300 Spartans, continue to inspire ideas of bravery and sacrifice. The Middle Ages, often called the medieval era, was a 1,000-year period characterized by significant changes in warfare, power structures, and cultural conflicts. This era saw the rise of feudalism, the construction of castles, advancements in military technology, and a series of religious wars and invasions that reshaped entire civilizations. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Europe fragmented into smaller competing territories. Feudalism became the dominant social and political system, where power was decentralized and land ownership determined authority. Kings granted land, known as fiefs, to nobles and lords in exchange for military service and loyalty. Lords, in turn, distributed smaller parcels of land to vassals or knights, who served as their warriors. Peasants or serfs worked the land in exchange for protection. During this time, society was organized into a strict hierarchy. At the top was the king, followed by nobles, then knights, and finally peasants at the bottom. This structure gave local lords a lot of power over their lands and people. However, it also led to frequent fights and small battles between these lords as they competed for resources and influence. Castles were more than just homes for lords. They were fortified military strongholds designed to withstand sieges. Early castles were wooden structures, later replaced with stone for better defense. Features like moats, drawbridges, and high walls made them nearly impenetrable. The Tower of London, built by William the Conqueror, demonstrated the importance of castle fortification in securing power. Knights became the face of medieval warfare, clad in heavy armor and wielding swords, lances, and shields. Knights adhered to the code of chivalry, emphasizing loyalty, bravery, and respect for women and the church. Tournaments and jousts were held to maintain their combat skills during peacetime. The Middle Ages were a time of significant innovation in military technology, with advancements that shaped the battlefield. Invented by the Welsh and widely used by the English, the longbow was a game-changer. Its range and power could penetrate armor, rendering heavily armored knights vulnerable. During the 100 Years' War, English archers armed with longbows decimated French knights, proving the longbow's effectiveness against traditional cavalry. Easier to use than the longbow, the crossbow could be operated with minimal training. Its bolts were powerful enough to pierce chainmail and plate armor, became a preferred weapon for urban militias and smaller armies. Gunpowder arrived in Europe from China in the 13th century, revolutionizing warfare. Cannons were first used in sieges to destroy castle walls. Handheld firearms like arquebuses appeared toward the end of the Middle Ages, signaling the decline of knights in heavy armor. The Crusades were a series of religious wars fought between 1096 and 1291, led by Christian states in Europe. Their main goal was to take back Jerusalem and other holy sites from Muslim rule. These wars were driven by both religious devotion and political ambitions. The Crusades began after Pope Urban II called on Christians at the Council of Clermont in 1095 to take up arms to reclaim the Holy Land. Many joined, inspired by their faith and promises of salvation and riches. Several major crusades took place. The First Crusade successfully captured Jerusalem and established Crusader states like the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The Third Crusade is famous for the rivalry between Richard the Lionheart of England and the Muslim leader Saladin. Despite some victories, Richard was unable to recapture Jerusalem. The Fourth Crusade strayed from its purpose, attacking and plundering the Christian city of Constantinople. This worsened the divide between Western and Eastern Christianity. The Crusades had a lasting impact. They boosted trade and cultural exchanges between Europe and the Middle East, but also created lasting tensions between Christians and Muslims. The Catholic Church gained power, but the wars left deep scars in history. The Mongol Empire, led by Genghis Khan, became the largest contiguous land empire in history through a combination of unmatched mobility, psychological warfare, and military strategy. The Mongols used several key tactics that made their armies incredibly effective. They relied on mobility, with highly skilled horse archers who could move quickly across long distances, allowing them to strike fast and retreat just as swiftly. Psychological warfare was another powerful tool. They spread fear by massacring entire cities that resisted, and the news of their brutality often led others to surrender without a fight. Their decentralized command structure also gave their generals the freedom to make quick decisions during battles, enabling them to adapt and respond to changing situations on the battlefield. In 1258, the Mongols, led by Hulagu Khan, attacked and destroyed Baghdad, which was a major center of knowledge and culture in the Islamic world. Using powerful siege weapons like trebuchets and battering rams, they broke through the city's defenses. The attack resulted in a massive loss of life, and one of the greatest tragedies was the burning of the House of Wisdom, a famous library filled with priceless knowledge. This event became a symbol of the enormous cultural destruction caused by the siege. Despite the destruction, the Mongol conquests brought some significant changes. They opened up trade routes across Asia, including the famous Silk Road, making it easier for goods and ideas to travel between regions. They also helped spread important technologies, like gunpowder, to Europe, influencing the course of history. The Middle Ages came to an end due to a few major events that changed power and warfare. In 1453, the fall of Constantinople occurred when the Ottoman Turks used huge cannons to break through the city's walls, which led to the collapse of the Byzantine Empire. Around the same time, feudalism began to decline as new gunpowder weapons made castles and armored knights less effective. Lastly, the rise of nation-states saw powerful kings and queens take control, replacing the old feudal system where power was spread out among many local lords. This period was a transformative time in military history. From knights in shining armor to the terrifying raids of the Mongols, the Middle Ages showcased humanity's capacity for both destruction and innovation. The introduction and widespread use of gunpowder revolutionized warfare during this period, fundamentally altering how battles were fought. Cannons became key tools in both offensive and defensive operations. Siege warfare transitioned from relying on battering rams to artillery bombardments. For example, the fall of Constantinople in 1453, although slightly before this period, the Ottoman Empire's use of massive cannons signaled the start of this revolution, as they breached the once impenetrable walls of the city. Castles became obsolete due to the power of artillery. By the mid-16th century, muskets replaced bows and crossbows as primary infantry weapons. Unlike longbows, muskets required less training, making it easier to equip large armies. The Spanish tercios, military units combining pikemen, musketeers and swordsmen, became the blueprint for modern infantry tactics. Fortified sieges during this time saw the development of stronger defenses to resist artillery. One key example of this was the star-shaped bastion fort, designed specifically to withstand attacks from gunpowder weapons. A famous instance of this is the Siege of Malta in 1565, when the Ottoman Empire used powerful gunpowder weapons against advanced fortifications built by the Knights Hospitaller. These strong defenses helped protect the island from the Ottoman forces. The 16th and 17th centuries witnessed the rise of naval powers as European nations competed for control of trade routes and colonies. In 1588, Spain, led by King Philip II, tried to invade England to spread Catholicism. The Spanish Armada had over 130 ships, but the English navy defeated it in a major battle. Several factors contributed to Spain's loss, including England's use of smaller, faster ships, and the clever strategy of sending fireships to confuse the Spanish fleet. Bad weather in the English Channel also played a role. The defeat was a turning point, marking the end of Spain's naval dominance and the rise of England as a powerful naval force. Other naval rivalries also played a big role in history. Portugal and Spain were in competition to control land in the Americas and Asia. At the same time, the Dutch Republic grew stronger as a naval power, which led to several conflicts, including the Anglo-Dutch Wars between 1652 and 1674, where the Dutch fought against England for control of trade routes and territories. Global exploration and colonial wars saw European powers expanding their reach around the world, which led to intense competition for colonies and resources. This expansion not only brought great wealth to these nations but also sparked conflicts across different continents. Colonial rivalries emerged as Spain and Portugal divided the New World through the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494, but other countries like France, England, and the Netherlands challenged this division. These nations established their own colonies in North America, Africa, and Asia, leading to frequent wars and conflicts over territory. In the Americas, one major conflict was the French and Indian War, which lasted from 1754 to 1763 and was part of the larger 7 Years' War. This war saw Britain fighting against France and their Native American allies over control of territory in North America. The result was a victory for Britain, who gained significant territories and reshaped the map of colonial power. The 30 Years' War, which lasted from 1618 to 1648, provides another example of a multi-phase conflict that was primarily fought in Central Europe. This war started as a religious struggle between Protestants and Catholics, but soon expanded into a broader European conflict involving powers like France, Spain, Sweden, and the Holy Roman Empire. Innovations during this war included the combined use of muskets and pikes by infantry and large-scale logistical operations to supply armies. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 ultimately established new principles of modern diplomacy and state sovereignty. During the early modern period, new ideas about military strategy began to emerge as people thought more about how war was changing. Niccolò Machiavelli, an important thinker, wrote a famous book where he stressed the importance of discipline and having strong citizen armies, rather than relying on mercenaries. Meanwhile, the ideas of Sun Tzu, from his ancient Chinese book The Art of War, started to influence European military leaders in the 17th and 18th centuries. His ideas on deception, being adaptable, and understanding the enemy became popular among European generals. Gustavus Adolphus, the King of Sweden, known as the father of modern warfare, introduced new tactics during the 30 Years' War. He used lighter, more mobile artillery and combined different military forces like infantry, cavalry, and artillery to work together. Over time, military thinkers like Antoine-Henri Jomini helped develop theories on war that focused on movement, logistics, and discipline. By the end of the 18th century, the balance of power was shifting towards industrialization, nationalism, and larger standing armies, paving the way for the next era of conflict. The Industrial Age transformed warfare dramatically, introducing new technologies, tactics, and social changes. This period saw the rise of large armies, industrialized weapon production, and new communication methods. Wars during this time reflected these advancements, making them more deadly and far-reaching than ever before. The Industrial Revolution, which began in the late 18th century, fundamentally changed how wars were fought. With advancements in technology, transportation, and communication, warfare shifted from small, localized battles to large-scale coordinated conflicts. Factories could now produce guns, cannons, and ammunition on an unprecedented scale. For example, the Springfield Armory in the United States became a model for mass-producing muskets using interchangeable parts. Steam-powered ships revolutionized naval warfare, allowing faster and more reliable transportation of troops and supplies. Railroads enabled armies to move vast numbers of soldiers and equipment quickly across continents. During the American Civil War from 1861 to 1865, the Union used railroads extensively to outmaneuver the Confederacy and maintain supply lines. The telegraph allowed military commanders to communicate instantaneously over long distances. This technology enabled better coordination of armies and quicker responses to enemy movements. The 19th century also saw the rise of nationalism, where people began identifying strongly with their nations. This had a profound effect on warfare, as it inspired massive armies made up of citizen soldiers rather than professional troops. The Napoleonic Wars, from 1803 to 1815, were greatly influenced by the French Revolution of 1789, which introduced ideas of national pride and the idea that everyone should participate in war. Napoleon Bonaparte, who led France, made conscription a law, forcing many men into the army and creating huge armies. His method of total war targeted not only enemy armies but also their economies and civilian infrastructure. For example, during his invasion of Russia in 1812, Napoleon gathered the largest army Europe had ever seen, with more than 600,000 soldiers. Other countries, inspired by Napoleon, also began using conscription and building bigger armies. The idea of citizen armies made wars more brutal and widespread, as entire populations were involved in the conflicts. Industrialization brought major changes to weapons, making them more deadly and effective. Before the Industrial Revolution, soldiers mainly used smoothbore muskets, which were not accurate at long distances. However, the invention of rifled barrels, which had grooves inside the barrel, made bullets spin, improving their accuracy and range. A good example of this is the Minier ball, a conical bullet used during the American Civil War, which made long-range shooting much more deadly and changed how infantry fought. Additionally, artillery also saw major improvements. Mass-produced cannons became more powerful, easier to move, and more accurate. The development of explosive shells instead of solid cannonballs made cannons even more destructive. The American Civil War, which took place from 1861 to 1865, is a great example of how warfare changed during the Industrial Age. It mixed old battle strategies with new technologies, shaping the way future wars were fought. One of the biggest innovations was the use of ironclad warships, which were protected by iron plates to survive cannon fire. The famous battle between the USS Monitor and the CSS Virginia in 1862 showed how effective these ironclads were, making wooden ships outdated. The war also saw the use of trench warfare, where soldiers dug long networks of trenches to shield themselves from enemy fire. This tactic slowed down battles and caused many casualties, a method that would later be used widely in World War I. The Union's ability to quickly produce weapons and transport supplies by railroad gave it a big advantage. Additionally, the Spencer repeating rifle, which allowed soldiers to fire several rounds without reloading, changed how infantry battles were fought. During the 19th century, several important wars highlighted the advancements of the Industrial Age. The Crimean War, which took place from 1853 to 1856, was one such conflict. It saw the use of railroads, telegraphs, and steamships, showing how important logistics and fast communication were to modern warfare. The war is also notable for introducing modern nursing, led by Florence Nightingale. Another significant war was the Franco-Prussian War, which occurred from 1870 to 1871. This war demonstrated the power of industrialized warfare, with Germany using railroads and advanced artillery to quickly defeat France. The modernization of warfare during the Industrial Age laid the groundwork for 20th century conflicts. It introduced concepts like mass mobilization, industrial-scale destruction, and the integration of technology into military strategy. The growing destructiveness of wars prompted nations to consider diplomatic resolutions and alliances, though these would later fail to prevent World War I. The first half of the 20th century witnessed two of the most devastating conflicts in human history: World War I from 1914 to 1918, and World War II from 1939 to 1945. These wars transformed global politics, economics, and societies, while introducing technologies and strategies that reshaped warfare forever. Let's examine them in detail. World War I, also known as the Great War, was one of the deadliest wars in history. It started in Europe, but soon many countries from all over the world became involved. The war began because of tensions between different nations, but it quickly grew larger than anyone expected. Many people hoped that World War I would be the last war, and that it would bring peace to the world. However, the effects of this war changed the political map of the world and set the stage for World War II, which would come just 2 decades later. The causes of World War I were complicated and involved many factors, including alliances between countries, national pride, military buildup, and political tensions. While the war started with a specific event, it had been building up for many years. By the early 1900s, Europe was split into 2 major alliance groups, each trying to protect itself, but also creating tension. The Triple Entente included Britain, France, and Russia. This alliance was formed to counter the growing power of Germany and its allies. On the other side was the Triple Alliance, which was made up of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Germany joined this group to protect itself from possible threats from both Russia in the east and France in the west. These alliances meant that if one country was attacked, the others in the alliance had to help defend it. This system turned what might have been a small conflict into a much larger war, pulling many countries into the fighting. The immediate cause of World War I was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, on June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, Bosnia. He was killed by Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist who was part of a group wanting independence for Slavic regions under Austro-Hungarian control. After the assassination, Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia for the act and gave them an ultimatum with harsh demands. Serbia agreed to most of the demands, but not all of them. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. This set off a chain reaction due to the alliance system. Russia mobilized its forces to support Serbia. Germany then declared war on Russia and its ally France. Finally, Britain joined the war after Germany invaded Belgium, a country that was supposed to remain neutral. There were also deeper causes that contributed to the start of World War I. One of these was imperialism, where European countries competed for colonies in Africa and Asia. This created tension, especially between Britain, France, and Germany, as each wanted more land and resources. Another cause was nationalism, or strong national pride, which led to conflicts. In the Balkans, Slavic nationalism threatened Austria-Hungary, while Germany wanted to prove itself as the most powerful country in Europe. Finally, militarism played a big role. Many countries were spending more money on their military and building bigger armies and navies. For example, Britain and Germany were in a naval arms race, each trying to have the strongest navy. These factors all added to the growing tension in Europe. World War I was unlike any previous conflict due to its scale, technological advancements, and the new strategies employed on the battlefield. Trench warfare was a type of fighting where soldiers dug long, deep ditches, known as trenches, to live in, fight from, and defend against enemy attacks. These trenches stretched for more than 400 miles along the Western Front, from the North Sea to Switzerland. Life in the trenches was very difficult. The trenches often flooded with water, turning into muddy pits. Poor sanitation led to diseases like trench foot, dysentery, and even the Spanish flu. Rats were everywhere, feeding on food scraps and even the bodies of fallen soldiers. Soldiers also had to deal with constant artillery fire, which caused immense stress and mental health issues, later called shell shock, now known as PTSD. Because neither side could gain much ground for years, battles often resulted in thousands of deaths for only a small gain in land. This created a situation called attrition, where both sides kept attacking, hoping to wear the other down. World War I also saw the introduction of new weapons that changed how wars were fought. Chemical weapons like chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas caused serious injuries and death. The first large-scale use of poison gas was during the Second Battle of Ypres in 1915, when Germany released chlorine gas that harmed many Allied troops. Soldiers had to use things like cloths soaked in urine to protect themselves before gas masks became standard. Tanks were introduced to help break through the trenches. The British first used tanks in 1916 during the Battle of the Somme. Early tanks were slow and not very reliable, but they could cross trenches and barbed wire, showing how future warfare would change. Machine guns became powerful weapons, able to fire hundreds of rounds per minute. These guns could kill large numbers of soldiers, making battles even more deadly. World War I was not just a European war. It involved countries from all over the world. Soldiers from European colonies in Africa, India, and Asia were brought to fight in Europe and other parts of the world. For example, Indian soldiers fought on the Western Front, while African troops fought under British and French commands. The war also involved countries outside of Europe. The Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers, opening new battles in the Middle East. Japan joined the war on the side of the Allies, making the conflict reach into the Pacific. In 1917, the United States entered the war, bringing in fresh troops and resources that helped the Allies win the war. This made World War I a truly global conflict. The Battle of the Somme was one of the largest and deadliest battles of World War I. It took place along the River Somme in northern France, where the Allies launched a huge attack to break the deadlock on the Western Front and relieve pressure on French forces fighting at Verdun. The battle started on July 1, 1916, and on the first day alone, the British Army suffered 57,000 casualties, the worst single-day loss in British military history. By the end of the battle, over 1 million soldiers from both sides had been killed or wounded. Despite such heavy losses, the Allies only gained a few miles of land. The Battle of the Somme became a symbol of the terrible cost of trench warfare and the high human price of modern war. After 4 years of intense fighting, World War I reached its breaking point in 1918. Germany was weakened by continuous Allied attacks and revolts within its own country. On November 11, 1918, an armistice or ceasefire was signed ending the fighting. However, the war was officially concluded with the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. This treaty imposed harsh conditions on Germany. Germany was forced to pay large reparations to the Allies, lose significant territories, and give up its colonies. Its military was also severely limited. These strict terms created a lot of anger in Germany, which contributed to the tensions that led to World War II. World War I changed the world in many ways. It led to the collapse of empires like the Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian empires. The war also changed national borders and introduced new forms of modern warfare. Although people hoped that the war would end all future conflicts, the unresolved issues from the war led to further problems and ultimately set the stage for World War II. World War II was the most devastating conflict in human history, involving over 100 million people from more than 30 countries. It resulted in an estimated 70 to 85 million deaths, including both military personnel and civilians. The war reshaped international politics, society, and the global balance of power, and its consequences continue to affect the world today. The causes of World War II can be traced back to the aftermath of World War I and the unresolved issues created by the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. But it wasn't just political dissatisfaction that led to war. The rise of new aggressive ideologies also played a key role. One of these ideologies was fascism, which grew in popularity during the 1920s and 1930s. Fascism is an authoritarian belief system that focuses on extreme nationalism, militarism, and dictatorial control. After Germany lost World War I, it was humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, which forced the country to pay heavy reparations, give up territory, and limit its military. Hitler and his Nazi party used this anger and resentment to gain support. He promoted ideas of Aryan racial superiority and promised to restore Germany's strength. In 1933, Hitler became Chancellor and quickly established a totalitarian regime. His goals included overturning the Treaty of Versailles, expanding German territory, known as Lebensraum or living space, and eliminating groups he viewed as enemies, especially Jews. In Italy, Benito Mussolini led the country with a fascist government. Mussolini sought to recreate the glory of the Roman Empire by expanding Italy's influence in Africa and the Mediterranean. In 1935, Italy invaded Ethiopia, which demonstrated its aggressive expansion and weakened the League of Nations, which was meant to maintain peace. Meanwhile, Japan was pursuing its own imperial ambitions. Seeking dominance over China and the Pacific, Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931 and launched a full-scale war against China in 1937. Japan's expansion was motivated by a need for natural resources and territory. World War II was marked by new military strategies, technological advancements, and the involvement of entire nations in the war effort. One of Germany's main strategies was Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. This involved fast, coordinated attacks using tanks, aircraft, and infantry to quickly overwhelm the enemy. In 1940, Germany used Blitzkrieg to invade France and the Low Countries, leading to the fall of Paris within weeks. This fast-moving style of warfare contrasted sharply with the slow, bloody trench warfare of World War I. World War II became a total war, meaning that entire nations were mobilized for the war effort, not just the military. Civilians were targeted as well, with strategic bombing campaigns aimed at weakening enemy morale and industrial production. The Blitz from 1940 to 1941 saw Germany bomb British cities like London, killing thousands of civilians. In the Pacific, Japan and the US also targeted civilian centers, causing massive destruction. World War II was a truly global conflict, with major battles taking place in Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. In Europe, Nazi Germany and its allies fought against the Allies, which included Britain, the Soviet Union, and later, the United States. Meanwhile, Japan's expansion led to the Pacific Theater, where the United States joined the war after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. The war saw significant advancements in technology and tactics. Fighter planes and bombers played a crucial role in both the European and Pacific theaters. Radar technology helped detect incoming aircraft, and code-breaking efforts, like the breaking of the German Enigma code at Bletchley Park, gave the Allies an important advantage. One of the darkest parts of World War II was the Holocaust, in which the Nazi regime systematically murdered 6 million Jews as well as millions of others, including Romani people, disabled individuals, and political prisoners. Concentration and extermination camps such as Auschwitz became infamous for their horrific treatment of victims. In 1945, Japan refused to surrender despite heavy losses. The United States developed a powerful new weapon, the atomic bomb, which was dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. The bomb killed about 140,000 people. 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, killing around 70,000 people. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945, bringing an end to the war. Germany formally surrendered on May 8, 1945, marking VE Day, or Victory in Europe. On September 2, 1945, Japan signed its surrender documents, marking VJ Day, or Victory over Japan, and officially ending World War II. World War II changed the world in many ways. It led to the creation of the United Nations in 1945, which aimed to promote peace and prevent future conflicts. The war also sped up technological and scientific advancements, but left lasting scars. The balance of power shifted, leading to the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, and marking the start of a new era in global politics. World War I had a huge impact on the world. After the war, four major empires, the Ottoman, Austro-Hungarian, German and Russian empires, collapsed. This led to the creation of new countries such as Poland and Czechoslovakia, as borders were redrawn across Europe. The war also led to the formation of the League of Nations, an organization created to promote peace and cooperation between nations. However, the League lacked the power to enforce its decisions and failed to prevent future conflicts. World War II caused even more lasting changes. The war set the stage for the Cold War, a long period of rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. In 1945, the United Nations was created to help promote global peace and cooperation, and it became a more powerful successor to the League of Nations. Another important effect was decolonization. As European empires weakened after the war, countries in Asia and Africa began to fight for and gain independence from colonial rule. Both world wars changed how wars were fought and how countries interacted with each other. World War II in particular influenced the way modern geopolitics and warfare are shaped today. The lessons learned, such as the dangers of nationalism, the growth of technology in war, and the heavy human cost of conflict, are still important and relevant in today's world. The Cold War was not a traditional war with direct fighting between the United States and the Soviet Union. Instead, it was a period of intense tension between the two superpowers, who were supported by their allies. The conflict was driven by two opposing ideologies: capitalism and democracy led by the United States, and communism led by the Soviet Union. Although the United States and the Soviet Union never directly fought each other, they were involved in many indirect conflicts, known as proxy wars, and both nations engaged in a dangerous nuclear arms race. Both the United States and the Soviet Union sought to develop more powerful weapons after World War II to prove their dominance. In 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, showing the devastating power of nuclear weapons. 4 years later, the Soviet Union successfully tested its first atomic bomb. In 1952, the United States developed the hydrogen bomb, an even more powerful weapon, and the Soviet Union followed with its own hydrogen bomb in 1953. By the 1950s, both superpowers had enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world many times over, which led to the idea of mutually assured destruction, or MAD. This concept meant that if one side launched a nuclear attack, the other side would retaliate with equal or greater force, ensuring total destruction for both sides. Because of MAD, neither side wanted to start a war, as it would lead to their own destruction as well. As tensions rose, both the United States and the Soviet Union took steps to prevent a full-scale nuclear war. In 1955, the Soviet Union created the Warsaw Pact, a military alliance in response to NATO, which increased military tensions. In 1963, the United States and the Soviet Union signed the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which banned nuclear tests in the atmosphere, space, and underwater to reduce radioactive fallout and ease tensions. Although the United States and the Soviet Union did not fight directly, they supported opposing sides in many conflicts around the world, particularly in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. These were called proxy wars. Korea was divided into two zones after World War II. North Korea, supported by the Soviet Union and China, wanted to unify the country under communism, while South Korea, supported by the United States, wanted to remain independent. In 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea, and the United States intervened under the banner of the United Nations. The war ended in 1953 with an armistice, but Korea remained divided. This conflict highlighted how the United States and the Soviet Union could fight indirectly through other countries. The Vietnam War was another major proxy conflict. Vietnam had been a French colony, but after World War II, nationalist forces led by Ho Chi Minh wanted independence and communism. The United States feared the spread of communism in Southeast Asia, so it supported South Vietnam, while the Soviet Union and China supported North Vietnam. The war escalated in the 1960s, with the United States sending large numbers of troops. However, after a long and brutal war, the United States withdrew in 1973, and South Vietnam fell to communism in 1975. The war was costly for the United States in both lives and money, and it damaged America's global image. The Cuban Missile Crisis is considered the closest the world came to nuclear war. In 1959, Fidel Castro led a communist revolution in Cuba, just 90 miles from the United States. In 1962, the United States discovered that the Soviet Union was secretly placing nuclear missiles in Cuba. The United States responded by blocking Soviet ships from bringing in more missiles. For 13 days, both sides engaged in brinkmanship, pushing dangerous situations to the edge of disaster to force the other side to back down. Eventually, the Soviets agreed to remove the missiles from Cuba, and the United States secretly agreed to remove missiles from Turkey and promised not to invade Cuba. The crisis ended without war, but it showed how close both countries had come to a nuclear disaster. The Cold War was a time of fear and tension, but also of intense competition for global influence. Although it didn't lead to direct war between the United States and the Soviet Union, the world lived under the constant threat of nuclear conflict for many years. Since 1991, the way wars are fought has changed dramatically. Unlike traditional wars between large organized armies, modern conflicts are often asymmetric, meaning one side has a much stronger military, while the other side uses unconventional tactics. This new form of warfare has led to more insurgencies, terrorism, and even cyber warfare, as technology has introduced new ways of fighting. Let's look at these changes in more detail. Asymmetric warfare happens when one side has a big advantage in resources and military power, while the other side uses different strategies to fight back. These strategies might include guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and terrorism, often carried out by smaller groups like insurgents, guerrillas, or terrorist organizations. After the Cold War, many conflicts shifted from wars between countries to internal struggles, with groups fighting for political, religious, or ethnic reasons. This led to many violent and brutal insurgencies, such as the conflicts in Rwanda and Chechnya in the 1990s. By the 2000s, groups like the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS became key players in global conflicts. In 2001, after the terrorist attacks on September 11th, the US launched Operation Enduring Freedom to remove the Taliban from power in Afghanistan. Despite having much stronger military forces, the US faced difficulties because the Taliban used asymmetric tactics like ambushes and improvised explosive devices, blending in with civilians to avoid detection. After 20 years of fighting, the US withdrew in 2021, and the Taliban quickly regained control of Afghanistan, showing how difficult it is for a powerful nation to win an asymmetric conflict. Modern warfare is heavily influenced by new technologies, including cyber warfare and the use of drones. Instead of physical battles, modern conflicts often involve attacks on digital systems. Cyber warfare can target government networks, disrupt power grids, or steal sensitive information. For example, in 2007, a large cyber attack hit Estonia, and in 2010, the US and Israel used the Stuxnet virus to damage Iran's nuclear program, marking a new era of using technology as a weapon. Drones or unmanned aerial vehicles have changed how wars are fought. They allow for precision strikes without putting soldiers in danger. They also help with surveillance, providing real-time information on the battlefield. In 2011, the US used a drone to target and kill key figures from Al-Qaeda in Pakistan. However, drones also raise concerns, especially when civilian casualties occur in places like Yemen and Somalia. AI plays an important role in modern warfare by helping predict enemy actions and automatically detecting threats. For example, Israel's Iron Dome uses AI to intercept incoming missiles, saving lives and reducing damage during conflicts. Since 2014, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has been one of the most significant. Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine, and fighting broke out in eastern Ukraine between Russian-backed separatists and Ukrainian forces. In 2022, Russia launched a large-scale invasion of Ukraine. The war has involved cyber attacks, drones, and complex military strategies. The Syrian civil war, which began in 2011, became a complex conflict with many sides involved. It started as protests against the government of President Bashar al-Assad, but soon turned into a full civil war, with global powers backing different factions. Russia supported Assad's regime, while the US and its allies supported opposition groups. ISIS also took advantage of the chaos to establish a caliphate. The war has led to a massive humanitarian crisis, with hundreds of thousands of deaths and millions of people displaced. Modern warfare is shaped by new technologies and strategies that make conflicts more complex and difficult to resolve. These changes have had a lasting impact on global politics and how countries prepare for and respond to conflict. War has had a huge impact on human society, influencing culture, gender roles, and economies in ways that still affect us today. From ancient battles to modern global conflicts, the effects of war have gone far beyond the battlefield, shaping art, literature, gender roles, and economic systems. Art and war have been linked for centuries. Throughout history, war has inspired artists to create works that reflect victories, losses, and the suffering caused by conflict. In ancient civilizations like Egypt and Rome, art was often used as propaganda to glorify victories and show power. For example, Egyptian hieroglyphs depicted pharaohs as powerful warriors, and Roman triumph arches celebrated military conquests. During the Middle Ages, art often combined religious themes with depictions of war, like the Bayeux Tapestry, which told the story of the Norman conquest. As time went on, artists continued to capture the human experience of war, with famous works like Francisco Goya's The Disasters of War showing the horrors of battle. In modern times, World War I and World War II inspired both national pride and disillusionment, as seen in the works of artists like Pablo Picasso, whose painting Guernica condemned the bombing of a Spanish town. Literature, too, has been shaped by war. In ancient times, epic poems like Homer's Iliad told the stories of great wars, focusing on heroism and the human cost of battle. Later, writers like Leo Tolstoy in War and Peace examined the impact of the Napoleonic Wars. World War I inspired poetry that captured the horror and disillusionment of soldiers, and after World War II, literature became more focused on the absurdity of war, as seen in books like Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. Today, conflicts like Vietnam and Iraq continue to inspire literature that explores the personal and societal costs of war. War has also played a significant role in changing gender roles. In ancient and medieval times, women's roles in warfare were often indirect, but they were deeply affected by conflict. Women took on roles like caregivers, helping wounded soldiers and maintaining the home front. Some cultures celebrated women warriors, like the Amazons in Greek mythology and Queen Boudica, who led a revolt against the Romans. During the 18th and 19th centuries, as national armies grew, women began to take on more active roles, especially as nurses. Florence Nightingale revolutionized battlefield medicine during the Crimean War, and figures like Molly Pitcher stepped into battle when necessary. History shows us that conflict is often inevitable, but it also demonstrates the power of diplomacy and innovation in resolving wars. War is deeply woven into human history. From the earliest tribal skirmishes to today's technologically advanced conflicts, warfare reflects both human ingenuity and destructive tendencies. Human ingenuity has always been a driving force in both progress and destruction. Early human inventions, originally created for survival, soon became tools of war. Simple tools like spears and bows were first used for hunting, but they also served as weapons for defending territory and engaging in conflict. For example, stone-tipped weapons discovered in Kenya dating back to around 300,000 BCE were likely used for both hunting and warfare. As agriculture began around 10,000 BCE, people started to fight over land and resources, leading to the construction of early fortifications like the walls of Jericho. This shows that humans not only used their creativity for progress, but also for defense and domination. The 20th century saw war reach unprecedented levels of destruction, especially during the World Wars. World War I introduced deadly new tactics like trench warfare, machine guns, and chemical weapons, which led to millions of deaths. World War II escalated this further, with the introduction of aerial bombings, tanks, and the horrifying use of nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These advancements in technology revealed the terrifying potential of human invention when used for destruction, leading many to realize that unchecked progress could threaten humanity's very survival. In response to the devastation of the world wars, there was a global push for peace. The United Nations was founded in 1945 to promote diplomacy and prevent future conflicts through international cooperation. Treaties like the Non-Proliferation Treaty, signed in 1968, aim to control the spread of nuclear weapons, shifting global priorities from power struggles to the preservation of peace. However, achieving peace is not easy. The Cold War, from 1947 to 1991, demonstrated that even with diplomatic efforts, tensions and the threat of war persisted, leading to proxy wars and nuclear arms races. Technology, while beneficial in many ways, has a dual role in warfare. It has made life easier through advancements in communication medicine and transportation, but it has also made warfare more deadly and efficient. In recent years, cyber warfare has emerged as a new form of conflict, where countries target each other's infrastructure and steal information without ever firing a shot. Drones and artificial intelligence have added another layer to modern warfare, where machines, not humans, make life or death decisions, raising ethical questions about the role of human judgment in combat. While technology can help prevent wars, like through surveillance and early warning systems, its misuse can escalate conflicts and make them harder to control. Preventing future wars and fostering peace is a shared responsibility. Governments, scientists, educators, and ordinary citizens all play a part in this effort. Education is key to promoting peace, as teaching history, critical thinking, and empathy can reduce fear and hatred, which are often the roots of conflict. Scientists developing new technologies must also consider the potential for misuse, ensuring that innovations benefit humanity and not harm it. Global cooperation is also vital. Organizations like the United Nations, the Red Cross, and Amnesty International work together to help mitigate the effects of war by providing humanitarian aid and advocating for human rights. Looking ahead, new challenges are emerging. Space warfare is becoming a concern as countries begin to militarize space. The creation of space forces suggests that space could one day become a battleground. Climate change also poses a threat, as resource shortages caused by environmental changes may lead to conflicts over water, land, and migration. Additionally, the rise of autonomous weapons raises ethical dilemmas. How can we control machines that can make decisions on their own, and who is responsible if they make mistakes? History shows a continuous cycle of war and peace. While human nature includes the drive to compete and defend, it also holds a capacity for compassion and cooperation. The future of war depends on whether we choose to repeat the mistakes of the past or use our ingenuity for building lasting peace. It is a shared journey that requires vigilance, ethical innovation, and a commitment to understanding and respecting one another.